Metroid Prime 4 has finally released. 18 years since the last Metroid Prime game. 8 years of development. A game that had to be brought back from the dead, originally being canceled, with development picked up by another studio. And after all of that, now that I've finally gotten to play the game, they should have left this in the ground. What a colossal waste of time. I would say it's a disappointment, but anyone with a brain already knew this was going to be bad long ago. The moment they showed a glimpse of that open world, you knew it was over, that they had no idea what they were doing. And it only got worse with the reveal of quirky NPC characters torturing you with their witty millennial dialogue. And I promise you, now that the game is complete, it is so much worse than I imagined. The open world is complete padding and drags down the entire experience, actively ruining the backtracking, a central component to Metroidvanias, probably the most defining feature of the genre. Your colorful cast of NPC characters aren't just persistent throughout the entire game, they drive the entire story. Samus is a background character in her own game. This is not a Metroid game. Maybe it was a Metroid game, but it has been mutilated into AAA slop. This is far more like something EA, Ubisoft, Sony would make, not a Nintendo game. Anyway, that's enough preamble. It's time to get into how another franchise from my childhood has been ruined forever. We might as well start with the open world. That was the first red flag that this game was going to be a massive disappointment, although I think red flag is a little too subtle, because there could not be a clearer demonstration that they have no idea what makes a Metroid game good, and that they don't care, that they're only following trends to please the lowest common denominator, a trend that's nearly a decade old, which is why this open world, not only is it not innovative at all, but it doesn't even emulate modern open worlds. It's completely empty, despite the fact that you'll be spending multiple hours in this giant desert in a game that is only 10 to 15 hours long. There's nothing in it. It has magic crystals that you can run into littered across the ground, and a handful, enough that you could count it on 2 hands, of Breath of the Wild shrines. That's it. Well, surely you must collect those crystals in an interesting way. No, you just run into them. No content, no design, just a slight detour to make going from place to place more annoying. Well, if there's nothing in it, how could you possibly spend hours of playtime in this one area? Well, those crystals, something that should be maybe an optional thing, is actually mandatory to beat the game. Not to get 100%, just to finish the game. It is mandatory to grind these pointless crystals. And this is the central hub of the game. You're going to be going back and forth through the desert many times. And over that time, you're going to be breaking a lot of crystals just as something to do in this giant empty nothingness. And even still, you will have to grind if you want to beat the game. And the primary way to collect these crystals is what I'm showing you right now. This is not gameplay. This is padding. Because the game, it can't be less than 10 hours. And making content is far too hard. So instead, just make them grind the hours away. But when you're not mindlessly grinding, what function does the open world serve? I mean, you're not exploring it, what you would normally do with an open world, because there's nothing to find. Well, it's, as I said before, it's a hub world. It connects all of the what are essentially levels you'll be playing through. Now, every good Metroidvania ever made, those areas would be interconnected, making a real breathing world, and they wouldn't feel like levels. Instead, we have a world map with extra steps, and those extra steps make the game agonizing. Remember, this is a Metroidvania. Backtracking is a central component. And if you ever want to get from one area to another area, you have to drive through a giant empty desert. That's where the multiple hours come from. It's not just from grinding crystals, it's from driving back and forth over and over again. And you have to do this every time. There is no fast travel because this game wasn't made by competent people, that or they knew exactly what they were doing and knew they had to pad out the playtime, because this is trying to be a modern big budget AAA AAA game, and the people who play those type of games are going to expect more than 10 hours of gameplay. I don't. I would much rather have a good game and it be short than have constant padding that ruins everything. The open world doesn't even feel like it's made by the same people as the rest of the game. Between the desert and each individual area are these transition zones, and they are the same for every single area. It's not a smooth transition between volcano and desert. It's this every single time, meaning you could remove the open world and it would change nothing except making traversing the world less annoying. It is the definition of tacked on pointless content. It's there to check a box. A box they had to check because of the Nintendo higher-ups. This was a conspiracy theory I had that I believe now has been all but confirmed, that the original Metroid Prime 4, made by Bandai Namco, was a perfectly fine Metroid game and was canceled by the higher-ups at Nintendo to make the game more like Breath of the Wild. The shrines are copy and pasted from that game. The shrines even look the same. Then you descend into a small area where you complete a puzzle for a reward. Then you dot the open world with these and bam, you have a game. Except it doesn't work here because Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild intentionally gave you all of the tools at the very beginning of the game. So no matter where you're going, what you're exploring, you could always complete the challenge in front of you. That is the antithesis of a Metroidvania, where the fun comes from getting new gear that allows you to explore more of the world, not so I could complete one puzzle in one temple in a giant empty desert I've already backtracked through 300 times. Let me tell you a real scenario that happens in the game. Not only does it happen, it will happen to basically everyone who plays the game. Miles, a character who we'll get to later, is like, you can tackle any of these 3 areas. So you travel across this giant desert and you get to the ice area, except you can't progress because of the ice wall. Okay, I guess I'll have to get a fire weapon of some sort. So you leave, drive across the giant desert again to go to the fire area. Except that's blocked off too. You fool! You thought you could play video game in your video game? But it's not all bad. You find a fire chip. And there you go. We can do it now. We can defeat the ice wall. Except no, you can't. That would make too much sense. In every other game, Samus could equip her own power-ups. But now we need the engineer character, Miles, to equip it for us. And he is in a completely different side of the map. So we have to drive all the way across the desert again. And it's even worse than that. In order to get to Miles, we now have to watch a cutscene and wait for a loading screen, then watch another cutscene for him to equip the power-up for us, watch another cutscene to get back to the desert, another loading screen, travel across the desert again, and only now can we actually play the game. Do you see now how the desert ruins the game? Do you see how it makes simple tasks take agonizingly long? Do you see how they intentionally use it to pad the playtime? But the open world wasn't the only problem in the sequence I just mentioned. There was another glaring flaw that may be easy to ignore in this video, but impossible when you're actually playing the game, and that's the NPC characters. We already knew just how annoying these characters would be long before release, but we can only dream of how pervasive they would be. A guesstimate I heard is about 25% of the game are escort quests. A number I kind of agree with. Maybe it's being a little generous, but it sounds about right. So a quarter of the game is spent babysitting characters that should not even exist, whose lives you have to protect. You will get a mission failure if they are killed. So if you're hoping to just ignore them, that's not an option. Not just for this, but for more I'll talk about later. So if you now add in the open desert segment, you're spending over a third of the game doing things that were outdated and annoying 10 years ago. Now, it's not the entire game, but that still seems pretty bad to me. Every single area has a new NPC that you have to save for them to just talk at you. Remember, Samus can't talk in this game, so you just have this extremely awkward dialogue where some annoying character is monologuing to themselves, and then after the annoying escort mission, the game finds some excuse for you to get separated, and you can finally just enjoy the game. That is, for most characters. characters. Now, everyone talks to you over the radio at some point, but there's one character who's there all the way. It's the one we already got to see, the one I warned everyone about. Miles, the nerdy, annoying, quirk chungus, Marvel movie quipping character, is present throughout the entire game. He never leaves you. Sure, radio communication gets broken sometimes, but for the majority of the game, if you ever spend too much time enjoying the atmosphere, or maybe you just accomplished something, here comes Miles giving you a hint, setting a waypoint, telling you how to solve a puzzle, because every new game has to be made for adult toddlers. You can't just explore an area on your own. Miles has to be there to make sure you don't miss anything. It obviously doesn't help that he's incredibly annoying. None of his jokes land. This is what people used to pretend Na'vi was like. At least you couldn't hear Na'vi's voice. None of the other characters are much better. They're definitely not as bad, but they're not really characters. They're just caricatures, because it's not like you have any time to spend with them. That would be a mercy if not for the fact that every new area is a new quirky nobody that you are introduced to and is then forced into the background. I feel like it'd be a little more efficient if they just weren't introduced at all. The real problem is the character you're actually playing as isn't a character. And yet, even with these limitations, they still want to have a generic AAA story. And since you, the player, can't talk, it means the story is driven by these annoying NPCs that shouldn't even be in the game, making you a side character in your own game. It's so weird because the plot was already set up to work like Prime 1, new planet, new ancient race, learn about them, defeat Big Bad, and kill some Metroids along the way. Metroid Prime 1 didn't need characters. In this game, doesn't need characters either. They only drag the experience down. I don't want to see cutscenes. I don't want to listen to annoying banter. And I definitely don't need an annoying tutorial character who's setting waypoints and telling me how to solve puzzles throughout the entire game. Unfortunately, what I've learned from every other AAA game is the wider audience, they love lighthearted dialogue that breaks the tension. They love yellow paint. They love empty open worlds, but it's not Metroid. What Metroid is a Metroidvania. It's in the name. And Metroidvanias are known for their non-linear level design. Something I won't say is necessarily absent from this game, but it's definitely worse than it's ever been. The game feels more linear than Metroid has ever felt. Maybe Metroid Fusion had it worse, but at least that was an interconnected world, one singular space station. No, Metroid Prime 4 feels linear in the same way that any level-based game feels linear. You go from the hub world to an area that's completely distinct, then you progress through the only way forward. All side paths are completely optional. It's not like they loop into each other. You get some new power-up, then you fight a boss, talk to Miles, and start the whole process all over again. I'm simplifying things a little bit, but you get my point. It doesn't feel like a Metroid game. It feels like a Zelda game. You know, that thing I predicted, that maybe originally the game was a Metroid game, and they have been forced to emulate a more successful franchise. And sure, there's some mandatory backtracking, but even that feels linear, because it's like you accomplish this thing, and then Miles is like, hey, you should go back to that area. It doesn't feel natural. It doesn't feel like exploration. And I know I've brought up Zelda a whole lot in my Metroid review, and that's because when the open world was first revealed, I predicted that the game was intentionally made to be more like Breath of the Wild. I think I was only slightly off the mark, and that the game was made to be more like Zelda in general. And I just want to reiterate, I predicted all of this well before the game came out, and I've done that on multiple video games now. So either there are these things called patterns that exist that you can follow, or I have superpowers. And either way, I think it's a good idea to subscribe, so you too can also tell the future. Despite the only person to predict it beforehand, or at least the only one I've seen multiple reviews compare the game to Zelda. I've even heard the distinct areas referred to as Zelda dungeons, and I honestly agree. They're entirely enclosed, distinct from the rest of the world. They have one upgrade that's used mainly for puzzle solving. You beat the boss and then move on to the more open area. That's not normal Metroid level design. I've already talked about the shrines being the same as Breath of the Wild, having an open world like like Breath of the Wild. What it also has, like Breath of the Wild, is distinct areas that each have their own character. You enter a new area, you meet the descendant of one of the champions, then you use their help to defeat a divine beast. In Metroid Prime 4, instead of being a champion, it's a member of the Federation. And just like Link, Samus can't talk, so the story is mainly told by these supplemental characters. All of these similarities to Zelda is what makes the game bad. If you haven't noticed, I haven't really talked about the standard gameplay that much. The just shooting, fighting enemies, fighting bosses, because that part of the game is fun. The visuals are very beautiful. Exploring the world when you're not being forced down a linear path or having your ear talked off is fun. The core Metroid part of the Metroid game is good. It's everything else on top of it that ruins it. That's why I know in my heart that my conspiracy is true. That we had a good game, a good Metroid game, and it was ruined, development extended to make the game more like Zelda, which sells better. And Zelda doesn't just sell better, Breath of the Wild sold better than every other Zelda game. So of course they would want to replicate that. But it doesn't work. Zelda is good because it's Zelda, and Metroid is good because it's Metroid. You can't just slap Zelda features on a Metroid game and think it's gonna work. And it's not just Zelda features, it's specifically Zelda Breath of the Wild, something that is already old. I'm tired of it. I made a whole video just talking about how pervasive that one game is. There are Breath of the Wild shrines in a Donkey Kong game. They cannot get over that one game. It ruined Mario Kart, and now it's ruined Metroid, and it's done far more damage to this. If it was just the open world, it'd be real bad, but all the NPC stuff is even worse. It's funny because all of these reviews agree with me, despite giving the game a ludicrously high score. They all say that the Metroid parts are good, and the tacked-on stuff brings the game down. The problem is you can't ignore the tacked-on stuff because it infects the entire game. Half of the power-ups don't even feel like Metroid power-ups. Metroid upgrades are like a new beam, something you can use in combat, not just puzzle solving. Here you get something that's incredibly slow, useful only when it's entirely necessary, and you would never even think to use it in combat if the game didn't make you. The slow down time beam that you can control is just the beetle from Zelda. It's a Zelda upgrade, not a Metroid one. I don't know, maybe I'm stretching here, but the point is, does it look fun? Because it's not. It's not just that the Zelda parts of the game are bad and the Metroid parts are good. It's that the Zelda parts, or if you don't think it's a Zelda clone, the standard AAA slop brings down the Metroid parts, which makes the entire game bad. There is no good because the bad makes the good parts worse. Backtracking, which should be fun, is ruined by the open world. The great atmosphere doesn't matter if you're constantly being interrupted. The exploration just feels worse from the linearity, and the combat is good, but it's definitely not the main draw of Metroid, and it definitely isn't helped by all of the escort missions. Now, if you haven't figured it out by now, I really don't like this game, and I knew that going in. This is not like Pokemon Legends ZA, where I'd hope in my heart that I would end up liking the game anyway, despite its major flaws. No, I knew I would hate this. Not just because I thought the game would be bad, but I hate this type of game. The generic AAA, lowest common denominator slop. And that's what really makes this game disappointing. It's not that it's bad in the way that Nintendo usually isn't bad. It's bad in the way that EA and Ubisoft games are bad. It has no ambition. They didn't even try with the open world. They didn't really try with the characters either. They're offensive to me, but to a normal person, they're just kind of whatever. Metroid Other M. Now that's a game that's bad in the ways that Nintendo is bad. That they tried something different that was very dumb, poorly advised, worked out horribly, but at least it was unique. It's interesting to play just to see how bad it gets, and it created memes that are funny to this day. No one's laughing at Miles intentionally or unintentionally. It just makes me angry. I would much rather play Other M or even Pokemon Legends ZA than any bad Ubisoft game or any bad Sony game, because at least they're trying to be fun. They're still video games at their core. There's no attempt at emulating movies to create a wider cinematic universe. There's no pandering to the glue-eating masses. Pokemon doesn't pander to anyone because you have to try to pander to someone, and Game Freak is incapable of trying. Game Freak only tries to be as lazy as possible, but I'd much prefer that. I really would, rather than trying to make a game as soulless as possible. And it's because of this that I could not bring myself to finish the game. Nope, didn't do it. Reviewed a game and didn't beat it? What a monster. This definitely isn't something that most reviewers do and just never admit. Personally, I don't think you have to finish it if it's bad. If something's so terrible that you can't even stand to play it any longer, I think people need to know. Why is it so bad? What made it so hard to finish? You should really only need smell to know that the diarrhea cake is not worth eating. But certainly after a taste, you shouldn't have to eat the whole thing to know it's bad. If I haven't made it clear enough, don't buy this game. It's no good. I just hope this is the last of its kind, that this game will bomb and Nintendo will continue to create bad games, but at least they'll be bad Nintendo games and not bad Ubisoft games. Anyway, bye.